Hello again, this is Marxist, and this is the inaugural episode of my Learning from the Classics series. We're going to be watching the upper bracket round 2 game from season 10 of ESEA, which was played in March of 2012, the LAN, that was. And I have the rosters on the first slide for Classic Mix-Up and Quantic Gaming. If you're wondering what this video will be like, it's going to be a lot like my 10 Ubers series videos, but instead of looking at several Ubers across different teams and different maps, we're going to watch one particular match and all sorts of different situations that came up in it. I choose this particular game because it's probably the best Badlands match I've ever seen. And I choose Season 10 not to go back any further because Season 10 laid a lot of the foundations for how NATF2 is played that are still used to this day. And even though some of the things that you'll see in this demo might look a little dated, I'm pretty sure they'd still work. The first situation we'll be looking at will be Quantic pushing through the flank with Uber advantage. Here we see CB buffing up the flank. Both scouts in the demo will be the flank in this case. And both soldiers are going to come down with their large buffs. And the Uber's going to come out very early because the soldiers need to retain their health in order for this push to work. And the cards fall, and Mix-Up ends up going several down. So what happened? Well, in this case, Quantic pushed through the flank. Mix-Up realized that and backed their combo up, because they don't want to get trapped in second. The Uber comes out really early and Harbleu has to bail, the medic for Classic Mix-Up, because if he dies, his team is going to lose the round. That ends up meaning that 4 players on Mix-Up get trapped in, and they basically just get bottled up and destroyed by Quantic Gaming. Just as important as what the combo did there, as well as Mackey, who came along, is what the flank did, which in this case would be Banny and both his scouts, Cyzer and Clockwork. Being as I haven't really focused very much on what the flank does during Ubers, we're going to watch what Banny does here. You see Banny sort of waiting as everybody's going to go ahead and get their buffs, and he's going to start setting a trap up here to get everything pushed back. And they're not going to go in until Ubers start to be exchanged. A scout goes in early because he can get on the demo fairly easily, and they end up trapping Mix-Up mostly behind the spire, which is going to cause them to go straight into the Uber, and all of a sudden they're 4 down. So what happened? Banny and his scouts wait patiently for something to develop, that's their Uber being popped, and as soon as that happens, they blow through the trap on Platinum, who's relatively unhealed and also kind of isolated. He goes down immediately. Without a demo, you really can't defend with or without Uber. Then, everything else sort of just falls in place with Mix-Up scouts trying to escape and there being an Uber in the way. In the second situation that we're going to talk about, we're going to watch a Mix-Up push out of their own last with Uber advantage, which is something you very rarely see and only really the most aggressive and coordinated teams can do. But in watching it, we can learn some lessons about how you could do it in your own games. You see TLR is going to start poking up here. He clears the trap. He sees Banny and Tyrone there. He gets the pocket. And then he's got to chase down here. Someone has to kill the medic, because an Uber on Quantic's case would be game ending for Classic Mix-Up. Banny ends up taking out TLR, but his job is done. TLR manages to make his way through upper main, or the kill box as some people call it. He gets through the sticky trap, which wasn't really there too strongly, and manages to catch out Tyrone, the pocket for Quantic, by shooting slightly to the right as Tyrone tries to move to the right. It's an easy frag for him, and then since he's closest to CB, the medic on Quantic, he decides that it's his time to go kill the medic. Somebody has to do it, and TLR is in the best position to do so. He manages to get the frag, so now his team has an actual hope of capping the spire. If nothing happens to CB there, pretty much unless the whole rest of Quantic all dies, Mix-Up's going to lose the round, because an Uber is just going to go to their last eventually. I'm going to show the same situation again, but this time from Enigma's perspective, because of how important the scouts are to this whole play and situation. Also because this particular clip shows one of the 2 approaches to capping a point. Whereas in some cases you can get on the point, bait people to it, and then kill them. You can also just run them all down, kill them, and then cap the point. Which, in a last push-out scenario, the latter sounds like a pretty dangerous proposition, but it ends up turning out for Mix-Up. Here we see Enigma checking out last. The most dangerous part of this whole play is in the early stages of it. Relic is left at last so that he can guard it. You'll see a back cap be started. Enigma comes down here. They've got to clean up that scout because he's the most dangerous person when it comes to the back cap threat. Enigma goes ahead and chases down this sniper pick because it's going to be hard to cap Spire if he continues to harass them, and they end up getting the Spire because everyone's dead. Mix-Up fends off the back cap by leaving Relic at last or having him go through the tunnel and run into it, and the scouts on Quantic are cleaned up by the scouts of Mix-Up. They're Romer and Mackey, who had gone sniper to deal with an eventual Uber v Uber fight at last, ends up taking out Platt, but it doesn't make a difference because he gets immediately killed by a scatter shot, and it ends with only Tyrone and Banny alive. Tyrone respawning, having been killed by TLR, and Banny being more or less stranded at mid because he can't get in, and he's hurt from having to fight TLR. So this shows you the second way to cap points, which is just kill everything, just get kills. And that's what people like Blank and the Madmen were really big on. If you've ever seen any of their videos, that was their favorite method for advantage type pushing of points. And it's well demonstrated here. Here we'll see Quantic push back out onto their own second after Mix-Up momentarily capped the Spire. We're going to see a Scout Uber here with advantage, which there's nothing wrong with. It's pretty much the optimal arrangement for a lot of advantage pushes. But the thing is you need, if you're going to try to do this, you need the other team to be very close, because it's kind of easy to kite a Scout, especially if you manage to juggle him. And then your Uber ends up being wasted, with half of it being spent running after people, and the Scout having to slow down so that the medic can stay with him, so that he remains Ubered. Mix-Up's kind of pushed in here because they're trying to stop Quantic from capping the Spire. The Scout Uber comes out and Platt goes down. Relic's going to go down here as well. That's the Roamer. Clockwork's going to chase the Med down here. That's Harb goes down. And then both these Scouts are going to die in the valley, and that's going to be a full wipe for Mix-Up. Best Uber you could have. What we saw here was essentially a defensive Uber from Quantic because they can't allow Mix-Up to just stand there and choke and spam them, or Quantic's going to end up going players down, and then it's an easy matter for Mix-Up to force their Uber, and then back away and push back in with their own Uber advantage, which is always a dangerous proposition when you're on Spire and in danger of having someone come into your last at some point. So they force Uber essentially on a Scout, and the Scout Uber works perfectly because people are so close to Clockwork when that Uber comes in on him. It's an easy matter for him to just meat shot everything down. And then Mix-Up's players get drawn in because they see a Scout Ubered through choke, and their goal is to block everything else from coming in, but it gets through because most of the heavy damage classes on Mix-Up are already dead or stuck in the valley. And CB stays on mid, which allows his team on mid fighting Mix-Up's flank to have a heal advantage. In situation 4, we're going to see Mix-Up forward hold in Badlands lobby. This technique was originally developed by the European team Dignitas, and it's since been used by basically everyone. The reason you would do this is if you're at Uber disadvantage, you can forward hold in lobby assuming that you have all 6 players alive, thus delaying your attacker until you get Uber. It's a bit of a risk to do it when you have Uber, because the other team can just sit there, essentially park the bus, and then suicide in on you, or try to force your Uber in some way, and it's easier for them to do that than if you were sitting at last. Here we see Mix-Up doing their forward hold. The important thing to do here is keep everyone as buffed as possible and both soldiers spamming the bats, or at least keeping eyes on it. They end up getting a kill here, which is exactly what you want. Harbleu's Uber's building all the time. Finally climbing the Spire, which is the only way to defeat this, Quantic lands on bats, and they go on Relic, who they know isn't going to have heals. As soon as Relic starts having to back up, Harbleu has to pull out or he's going to die. Everybody leaves, Quantic's Uber gets forced. What happened here is that Mix-Up's forward hold was a success, even though Quantic knew that it was coming, so that's why they were climbing the spire so quickly. It ends up giving Harbleu about 70% Uber when he should have only had maybe 20 or 30 under normal circumstances, which is a pretty big thing, especially because CB's Uber gets forced so early and he is so hurt that it gives Mix-Up a pretty solid chance of being able to hold last and also push out. I'll start by saying I feel almost bad putting this in a guide video or an analysis video, but it is something that you need to be aware of as a possibility if you want to win rounds in a cheap way, and also that teams are going to try to do this to you a lot. And this comes right off of the heels of the situation we just talked about, which was Mix-Up's fairly successful forward hold. If you'll remember, in the previous video, Mackey dies almost right away, before the push even comes. And if you look at the kill feed in this slide, you'll see that CB and Tyrone just died. And Quantic's well on their way to completely wiping at last, which is exactly what Mix-Up has wanted all this time. However, Mackey dying very early, and probably also hearing that his combo was going to have an awful Uber, thought, you know what, maybe I could get a spy back cap because they're going to push to Spire in a hurry. And that's what he goes for. Mackey in this does a really crafty thing in that he disguises as a friendly sniper. That way, if anyone on Mix-Up sees him, they'd think it's a sniper preparing for some kind of last. And because he's disguised as a friendly, he immediately begins capping the point as soon as he uncloaks, and that's that. And that's how the first points of this game were scored. Mackey, going down very early in the forward hold situation, knew that his Uber was going to be bad when it came out, so he goes spy. The thing that's really neat about this is that he disguises as a friendly spy, which allows him to cap the point very, very quickly, whereas normally you'd have to swipe your knife or shoot your gun at some point, which would have caused Mix-Up to turn around. The two things that allowed this to happen were that Mix-Up was fairly certain that everyone that was alive was in front of him. They ended up walking right by him, and they didn't really check. They also didn't leave anyone at last, because they thought that everyone was in front of them. And thirdly, they didn't leave any stickies on the point, which would have delayed Mackey, and he uncloaks almost right behind them. There would have been someone on him had he been held up and had to shoot stickies off the point. And in the interest of time, that's where we'll stop for now. I'll continue with the same game, analyzing additional situations later on in future videos. And you should have a clickable link down here once I get everything squared away. So I hope you found this to be informative and enjoyable. Until next time.